My war began with a single polite email that landed on a Tuesday afternoon. It felt less like a notification and more like a carefully aimed stone shattering the quiet of my kitchen. The subject line was deceptively simple: a follow up regarding Sophia's science fair project. The sender was Northwood Middle School, and a cold knot of dread instantly formed in my stomach. This was not a message of congratulations. It was the opening shot in a battle I didn't know was coming, an electronic fuse that would nearly break my daughter before ultimately launching her toward the stars. The message was from Mr. Clark, her 8th grade physical science teacher. He was a man who wielded compliments like weapons. He began by praising Sophia's project as commendably ambitious, a phrase that dripped with condescension. Then he brought down the hammer. He wrote about his pedagogical concerns, about a project whose complexity was in a significant state of disconnect with the established 8th grade curriculum. He even had the gall to suggest her work bore an unlikely and striking resemblance to doctoral level research he claimed to have stumbled upon online. The subtext, wrapped in a suffocating blanket of educational jargon, was brutally clear. He was accusing my 13-year-old daughter of being a fraud. To understand the tidal wave of pure, unadulterated fury that washed over me, you have to understand my daughter Sophia. She's simply wired differently. While her friends speak the ever-shifting languages of social media trends and pop culture, Sophia's native tongue is the quiet, magnificent wonder of the cosmos. She is reserved, almost painfully shy, but her mind is a supernova of relentless curiosity that can leave even me, a data analyst, struggling to keep up. For her entire life, my parenting philosophy has been to provide her with the tools to explore that incredible mind. We didn't do flashcards, we built circuit boards. We didn't just look at photos of nebulas, we spent frigid winter nights with our telescope aimed at the moons of Jupiter. That email wasn't just an accusation against Sophia. It felt like an indictment of our entire life together, a categorical rejection of every late night I had spent teaching her how to chase down an answer. I had not even seen the final version of her project. I just knew it had consumed her for the better part of a month. Her topic was an analysis of light curve data from the public archives of the Kepler Space Telescope. She was looking for the minute variations in starlight that could indicate the atmospheric density of distant exoplanets. I know it sounds massive, but she was not building a rocket in her bedroom. She was using publicly accessible datasets and open source astronomical software, tools that exist for the specific purpose of letting amateur enthusiasts participate in real science. She was doing exactly what a science fair is meant to encourage: learning, experimenting, and pushing her own boundaries. I found her in her room, curled into a question mark in her reading chair. She was just staring at her bookshelf, her eyes completely unfocused. When I gently told her about the email, the quiet composure she wears like armor simply disintegrated. The sound that came out of her was a deep, guttural sob, the sound of a child whose integrity has been questioned for the very first time. Through shuddering breaths, she swore to me that she did all the work, that she wouldn't even know how to cheat on something so complex, that the very idea made her feel sick. I believed her instantly. It was not just a mother's instinct, it was pure logic. I had seen the evidence of her struggle. I had seen the notebooks filled with her frantic, brilliant scrawls, the recycling bin overflowing with discarded lines of code, the evenings she spent poring over a single dense academic paper from a university server just to understand one formula. Sophia was a purist. She would rather fail honestly than succeed with a lie. I spent an hour crafting a reply to Mr. Clark, forcing my seething anger into a mask of cool professionalism. I explained Sophia's long-standing obsession with astrophysics. I listed the specific data archives and simulation software she had used. I argued that her advanced understanding was the result of genuine immersive passion, not plagiarism. His reply came back in less than 30 minutes. It was a digital slap in the face. He wrote that as an educator with over 2 decades of experience, he was acutely aware of the markers of AI-generated text and sophisticated copy and paste methodologies. He then claimed her paper used terminology and analytical frameworks that were statistically anomalous for a student of her age. He was literally punishing my daughter for being intelligent and articulate. The school's proposed solution was a formal video conference to discuss the issue of academic integrity and determine an appropriate course of action. The phrase course of action hung in the virtual air like a guillotine. They were going to brand my brilliant, fiercely honest daughter a cheater. They were going to scar the academic record of a child whose only sin was that she loved to learn too much. For a long moment, I felt utterly powerless. I am a data analyst, not an astrophysicist. How could I possibly defend her against a teacher who was so smugly, so dangerously, so completely wrong? Then a name surfaced from the depths of my memory, Dr. Evelyn Reed. Years ago, my first job out of college was at a chaotic software startup in Chicago. One of my fellow engineers was Evelyn. She was quiet, a certified genius who seemed more comfortable with machine language than with human conversation. While the rest of us were hitting the bars in River North, she was staying late, covering whiteboards in complex algorithms just for the sheer joy of it. We became unlikely friends, bonding over late-night debugging sessions fueled by deep dish pizza. We had kept in touch sporadically as my career took me into the corporate world and hers. Well, hers went stratospheric. Today, Dr. Evelyn Reed was the head of the astrobiology department at Caltech, one of the foremost authorities in her field. Despite the fame and the prestigious position, she was still the same humble person I remembered. She always replied to my emails. With my stomach twisted in a knot of sheer desperation, I took a wild shot. I poured the entire ugly story into an email. I attached Sophia's complete project folder, her detailed research notes, the screenshots of her code, and the full infuriating email exchange with Mr. Clark. I did not know what I was hoping for, a piece of advice maybe, an article from a journal that could support our case. Her reply came in less than an hour. She said she had read Sophia's entire project and was, in her words, absolutely floored. Then she made an offer that made me suck in a sharp breath. She asked for the link to the video call she wanted to join. She said she would introduce herself simply as a family friend with some experience in the subject. When I asked her why on earth she would do this for us, her answer hit me right in the chest. She wrote, "Because there is nothing in this world I remember more clearly than being the girl in the back of the classroom, terrified that her own curiosity made her a freak." The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. The moment our faces appeared in the grid of video windows, the air felt thick with condemnation. Mr. Clark, his expression a mask of grim self-importance, launched into his prepared speech. He droned on and on about the school's unwavering commitment to academic honesty, about the unique difficulties of maintaining high standards in a digital world, and how Sophia's work represented a severe departure from established developmental benchmarks. He was a fire hose of soulless jargon, talking about things like unauthorized intellectual scaffolding and asynchronous skill acquisition. It was a cold, systematic execution of my daughter's character. The principal, a Mr. Miller, simply nodded along, his face a portrait of solemn bureaucratic concern. Next to me on the sofa, Sophia seemed to be shrinking, her hands clenched into white fists in her lap, her eyes fixated on the floor. I let Mr. Clark talk. I let him finish his entire self-righteous monologue. I let the silence that followed fester, heavy and thick with accusation. Then I took a deep, centering breath. "Thank you for sharing your perspective, Mr. Clark," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "I actually asked a friend of mine to sit in on this call. She's an old colleague with a background in this specific field, and she was kind enough to look over Sophia's project. I thought her input might be helpful." Right on cue, a new window popped into the video conference. The name simply read, Dr. Evelyn Reed, Caltech. She unmuted her microphone and turned on her camera. The shift in the digital room was instantaneous and absolute. Mr. Clark's smug expression froze, then completely collapsed. His jaw went slack. Principal Miller leaned into his webcam so fast his face distorted, his eyes bulging with a cocktail of raw panic and utter disbelief. "And Sophia?" Sophia looked up from her hands, and for the first time in days, the shadow of a smile flickered across her lips. Evelyn introduced herself simply as Evelyn Reed. She did not list her credentials. She did not have to. She radiated a quiet, unshakable authority that filled the virtual space. She began by stating that she had reviewed Sophia's entire body of work, from her initial logbooks to her final paper. She said she was, in all sincerity, amazed, not because it was plagiarized, but because of its elegance and its methodological soundness. "What Sophia has done here," Evelyn started, her voice calm but carrying the density of a neutron star, "is a perfect example of how modern scientific discovery works. She utilized public archives and open source tools to ask a very sophisticated question that is central to my own research. Her data analysis is rigorous, her logical progression is impeccable, and her conclusions, while necessarily speculative, demonstrate a remarkable and intuitive grasp of spectroscopy and atmospheric science." She then turned her attention directly to Mr. Clark's primary accusation. "You noted a concern," she said, her words like surgical instruments, "that the work was too advanced for an 8th grader. I noticed that in her data processing, Sophia implemented a very specific statistical filter to remove the noise from stellar flares in the transit light curves. It's a rather obscure technique. I know this because my team and I developed it for a deep space survey about 15 years ago. It was never published in a mainstream journal. The documentation for it exists only in a single technical memorandum on an archived university server. The only way anyone could find it, understand it, and implement it correctly is through painstaking, original, and deeply dedicated research. It is the very definition of academic integrity. It is the work of a real scientist." Mr. Clark was a statue carved from chalk. The blood had drained from his face, leaving it a sickly, mottled gray. He opened his mouth and tried to stammer something about district guidelines and standardized learning, but Evelyn gently cut him off. "With all due respect, Mr. Clark," she said, her tone still patient but now edged with steel, "the standard you should be enforcing is one that celebrates this kind of intellectual fire, not one that extinguishes it because it doesn't fit neatly in a box. We are in a desperate race to inspire the next generation of thinkers. When a student like Sophia decides to build her own rocket, our job is not to tell her she's flying too high. Our job is to help her build a better launch pad." Then she looked straight at Sophia and her whole demeanor softened. "Sophia," she said, her voice filled with a profound warmth, "what you did was not against the rules. It was the entire point of the game. It was real science, and it was brilliant. Don't you ever let anyone make you feel small for having a big mind." Principal Miller, clearly realizing he was the senior officer on the Titanic just as it hit the iceberg, immediately began to backpedal with the frantic energy of a man trying to outrun a tsunami. He started babbling about this being a critical, teachable moment and the result of a regrettable communication gap, promising an immediate and full reversal of their findings. Mr. Clark was completely silent, a living monument to public humiliation. The meeting ended in a mess of flustered apologies from the principal. The accusation was gone incinerated, but so was Sophia's trust in her school. That evening, long after the adrenaline had subsided, Sophia came into the living room. The tear stains were gone. Her eyes were bright with a new, sharp clarity. In her hand, she held a fresh, empty notebook. She told me that the call had changed something in her. It was never about the grade, but now it was not even about being right. It was about creating something so undeniable, so meticulously hers, that it could never be questioned again. She had a new idea, and as she began to sketch it out on our dining room table, I realized she was not just starting a new project, she was writing her Declaration of Independence. A few days later, a curt, formal email arrived from the school. After a comprehensive reassessment, they had awarded Sophia's project a perfect score and had selected it as the school's entry for the state science fair. There was no apology for the false accusation, no acknowledgement of the emotional damage. It was a sterile bureaucratic attempt to make the problem disappear. It did not matter. Sophia had already moved on. She was on a new mission. Our dining room table vanished under an avalanche of research. It was covered in scientific journals, printouts of stellar maps, and textbooks bristling with a rainbow of sticky notes. Her laptop was a constant portal to university forums, Python coding environments, and three-dimensional molecular models. She called her new endeavor the Arecibo Protocol. When I asked her what it was, she looked at me with an intensity that was almost startling in a 13-year-old. "It's a way to say hello," she said. "It's a design for a message that any intelligence anywhere could hopefully understand." She walked me through it one evening, and I was utterly staggered. The Arecibo Protocol was a complete, multi-layered proposal for a universal communication system. This was no high-level concept, it was a finished blueprint. She had designed a message structured around the fundamental constants of physics, the spin-flip transition of the hydrogen atom, the sequence of prime numbers, the atomic weights of life-essential elements. It was a message that, in theory, could be decoded by any species that understood math and physics without any shared language or frame of reference. It was a mathematical handshake offered to the cosmos. The final paper was over 70 pages long. It included her mathematical proofs, the encoding logic she had coded from scratch, and even a simulated transmission and decoding sequence. She was spending her evenings auditing graduate-level seminars online and exchanging emails with radio astronomers who had no idea they were corresponding with a middle schooler. She was powered by a calm, controlled rage, an unbreakable will to build something so profound that no one could ever doubt her again. On a whim, she submitted the Arecibo Protocol to the American Youth Science Initiative, a prestigious national competition for high school students. She did not expect to win. It was about planting a flag in the ground. Her work, her name, her proof. A month later, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number from Pasadena, California. My stomach did that familiar flip, but this time it was a flip of hope, not fear. The woman on the line was a director from the competition. It turned out one of the preliminary judges was a senior researcher at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He had not just been impressed, the director said he was electrified. He had immediately walked the paper down the hall to the head of his department. Things accelerated at a dizzying pace. Sophia was invited to Caltech to present her protocol at a special symposium on the future of interstellar communications. The university offered her a formal mentorship with a leading radio astronomer and a guaranteed place in their elite summer research program, an honor usually reserved for their top undergraduate students. She was 13. A major technology website picked up the story, running a feature with the headline, "The 8th grader who wrote a welcome mat for the universe." Our local school district was inundated with calls from proud parents, alumni, and even professors from the state university. Under a mountain of public pressure, Principal Miller held a special school assembly to publicly celebrate Sophia's historic and inspirational accomplishment. We found out later that Mr. Clark had been quietly reassigned to teaching 6th grade general science and was permanently removed from any role involving the science fair or advanced student programs. But the real victory, the moment that will be burned into my memory forever, came at that symposium at Caltech. Dr. Evelyn Reed was there to deliver the keynote address. She stood on stage and gave a blistering, beautiful speech about the solemn duty of educators to find and shelter the outliers, the kids who don't fit the curve, because they are the ones who bend it toward the future. Then she turned her gaze to the front row where Sophia was sitting. "Sometimes," she said, her voice echoing in the silent auditorium, "the next great leap doesn't come from a billion-dollar lab or a government committee. Sometimes it comes from a 13-year-old girl at her dining room table who was told her dreams were too big and who decided to answer by designing a way to talk to the stars." Sophia's eyes welled up, but this time the tears did not fall. She took a deep breath, walked onto that stage, and stood at the podium. In a voice that was clear and steady, she presented the Arecibo Protocol to a room packed with some of the most brilliant scientific minds in the world. She never wavered, she never faltered. When she finished, the room exploded. The standing ovation was a physical force, a roar of approval that seemed to shake the building to its foundations. On the drive back to the hotel that night, she was quiet, watching the lights of Pasadena streak past the window. After a long silence, she turned to me, her face serious and carrying a new weight. "Mom," she asked, her voice soft but firm, "do you think they could actually hear it if we really sent the message? Do you think anyone is listening out there?" I looked at my daughter, this incredible, resilient, impossibly brilliant young woman who had taken an accusation and forged it into a key to the universe. A wave of pride so powerful it was almost painful washed over me. "Sophia," I said, my voice thick with emotion. You just stood in front of 1,000 of the smartest people on earth and made every single one of them listen to you. I think you already have your answer.